I bought and tested 14 of Coleman's most popular tents, and I'm gonna share everything I know with you right now. Here's how long each Coleman tent took me to set up. Generally, the larger the tent capacity, the longer it'll take to set up. I was able to set up every single Coleman tent on this list on my own. Also, the more feature-rich a tent is, the longer it'll take to set up too. For example, if your Coleman tent has a screen room, that'll add a good 4 to 6 minutes to your setup. Another example is the hinged D-door, which comes with a few Coleman tents, and this itself takes 1.5 to 2 minutes to set up. As for the ease of takedown, here's how long it took me to take down and pack up each Coleman tent. For the smaller 2-person to 6-person tents, I didn't have to rip this strip off the bottom of the bag to expand the bag. If you rip the strip off, the bag will become a lot bigger, and you can probably shave 2 to 3 minutes off of these pack-up timings. I had to rip the strip off the bigger 8 to 10-person tents, and especially for the Weathermaster, it was a little bit of a tight fit even after the bag was expanded. For the ease of setup and takedown, here's how I rated each Coleman tent. For spaciousness, I looked at the peak height, the livable space, and the base area of each Coleman tent. Here's the peak height of each tent from the lowest to the highest. The Coleman pop-up tents have a lower than average peak height, especially the 2-person pop-up tent. I wouldn't recommend having a mattress that's thicker than 4 inches inside this tent, and that's for someone of my height. The Coleman 4-person pop-up tent can take a mattress that's about 6 inches thick, and for the Sundome 2-person tent, I could squish a 9-inch thick camping mattress inside. The rest of my Coleman tents have significantly higher peak heights, so I wouldn't worry too much about the thickness of the mattress. For livable space, I looked at the standing room in each Coleman tent. I'm only about 5'3", and I couldn't even fully stand up in all of the 2-person and 4-person Coleman tents. I could, however, stand up at the peak height in the 6 to 10-person Coleman tents. But most of these tents, like the Evanston and all the 3 Sundome tents, these are dome-shaped tents which have peak heights only at the center of the tent. The moment I take 2 small steps back in any of these tents, my head would touch the wall of the tent. The Montana and Red Canyon tents have more of an extended dome shape. The peak height is still only here at the center of the tent, but it takes me about 3 small steps away from peak height to touch the mesh at the top of the tent. If you want more livable space inside the tent, I'd recommend either the Instant Cabin or Weathermaster 10-person tents. The 10-person Instant tent has a cabin shape, not a dome shape, so I could stand up practically everywhere inside the tent. While the Weathermaster is more of an extended dome than a cabin-shaped tent, it had the highest peak height of 80.5 inches, and I could stand up almost everywhere inside the tent as well, except for this small triangular space at the sides here. I also calculated the total base area in each of these Coleman tents from the smallest to the largest. All of these measurements that I took were slightly smaller than the marketed dimensions by Coleman, and to be more specific, anywhere between 1% and 8% smaller. Also, for the Coleman pop-up tents, the base area is oval in shape, so it's actually a bit smaller than what I managed to calculate. Here's some info about the mattress sizing of each Coleman tent, and here are some things to take note of. The Sundome 2-person tent can easily fit 2 regular sleeping pads and could actually fit even an entire queen-sized mattress. Because of the oval shape of the 2-person pop-up tent, I could fit only 2 regular pads and definitely not a queen. The 4-person pop-up tent couldn't fit 4 regular sleeping pads, it was at most 3 pads, or 1 queen bed. While the Sundome 6-person tent could fit 6 regular sleeping pads, the length of the tent is actually a few inches shy of being able to fit 2 queen beds. The Elite Sundome 6-person tent has a big base area, and I could fit 7 regular sleeping pads, or 2 queen beds. The Red Canyon 8-person tent has a humongous base area. It fits 10 regular sleeping pads or 3 queen beds. So for spaciousness, here's how I rated each Coleman tent. For comfort, I'm going to go through not only these general tent features, but these Coleman specific features as well, starting with the doors and the hinged D-door feature. Here's the number of doors that each Coleman tent has, and also whether there's a hinged D-door. Only my 10-person Weathermaster and Instant tents as well as the Elite tent have 2 doors, but only one of them will be hinged. The Montana 8-person tent has a single door that also comes with the hinged feature, and the rest of my Coleman tents have only 1 door with no hinged feature. I'll show you some of the doors right now. The hinged D-door is actually one of my favorite Coleman features. Coleman will provide you with these 2 extra fiberglass poles to install the hinged door. And when you have this hinged door, it takes just 5 seconds tops to get in and out of the tent. On the other hand, zipping a door open and shut will take about 15 seconds, or maybe even more, depending on how snaggy your zippers are. On top of that, you can even zip the hinged door up with the fiberglass poles in place. As for the room divider, only the bigger tents and the elite tents come with them. I'm not really a big fan of Coleman room dividers though, because they usually either have really big gaps at the sides, the top, and the bottom, or they're really see-through. And the space behind each Red Canyon divider is really minimal, fitting just 2 pads, and there's not even a zip down the middle to get around it. Coleman's darkroom tech is another one of my favorite features. Here's what the darkroom feature looks like in the middle of the day. The bathtub flooring at the bottom of the tent doesn't have darkroom tech though, and also there's a gap between the ceiling mesh and the rainfly that will let some light in. And if you have a darkroom tent with these vents here by the sides, light will also seep in through the vents. So if you want it to be darker, you can't guy out the rainfly too much. But even with the vents open, compare this darkroom tent to a regular Sundome tent without the darkroom tech, there's no comparison. Sometimes the darkroom feature can be a bit defective. I realized that this Carlsbad tent isn't as dark because Coleman used a different fabric for the bottom of the tent. It should be as dark as these windows, but they're not. When you buy an elite tent instead of the regular Sundome, you get 2 feet more in length, this extra hinged door, so 2 doors in total, a room divider to create 2 separate rooms, these super cool auto-rolling windows, and also pre-attached lighting, so very feature-rich. Here's a quick summary of all the storage options in each Coleman tent from the most to the least. I found Coleman's storage options to be really quite lacking. For example, I have no idea why not all Coleman tents have e-ports. Also, most Coleman tents have only 2 pockets with an average size of about 9 by 7 inches. The 3 better than average exceptions are the Weathermaster 10-person tent, which comes with 4 of these pockets, the Red Canyon 8-person tent, which comes with an extra gear loft, and the Skydome 4-person tent, which comes with this pretty big pocket and also an extra gear loft. And the Coleman tents with the worst storage options are the pop-up tents. They each come with only 1 pocket, which is split into 2, no gear lofts, no e-port, and not even a lantern loop. So I had to hang a lantern up using the door latch attachment. For comfort and features, here's how I rated each Coleman tent. On a hot day without any rain, the bigger 8-person and 10-person Coleman tents come with a lot of ceiling mesh and a decent number of windows. The 10-person instant tent is the most well-ventilated amongst the bigger Coleman tents, complete with not just a lot of ceiling mesh, but a whopping 7 massive windows, giving you an additional 9,400 square inches of window ventilation. Next up, we have the Weathermaster 10-person tent, also with ceiling mesh, but with only 6 windows. All of them are smaller for a total of 5,500 square inches of ventilation. The better ventilated 8-person tent is the Red Canyon with ceiling mesh plus 4 windows for a total of about 3,300 square inches of window ventilation. The Montana 8-person tent also has a decent amount of ceiling mesh, but there are only 3 windows which are not very big for a total of about 2,200 square inches of ventilation. For the smaller 2-person to 6-person Coleman tents, instead of ceiling mesh, you get humongous mesh walls instead, and windows, of course. The most ventilated, smaller Coleman tent is easily the Skydome tent. It comes with not 1, not 2, but 3 humongous mesh walls plus a window on the last wall. The Sundome tents are a close second, each with 2 mesh walls. The other 2 walls have ventilation through window mesh. The Evanston and Carlsbad tents have a little less ventilation than the Sundome tents, with just 1 mesh wall each and 3 windows on the other 3 walls of the tent. The 4-person instant tent has 3 pretty big windows, but no mesh at all on this wall here. It also has no mesh walls, no ceiling mesh, and only a small vent at the top. And in last place, we have the Coleman pop-up tents, with just 1 small window that's part of the door and some ceiling mesh at the top of the tent. For heavy rain ventilation, I looked at the number of windows and vents that can be left open in the heavy rain. For heavy rain, the Weathermaster 10-person tent has the best ventilation with these 2 angled windows. They're each pretty huge, giving me about 2,100 square inches of rainy day ventilation. Next up, we have the Evanston 6-person tent. Because the rainfly extends over the screen room a little, I found that I could leave the window on the front length of the tent open. This plus a mesh wall vent at the back gave me about 1,800 square inches of ventilation. The Carlsbad tent has the exact same configuration, except mine's a smaller 4-person tent, so there was 1,300 square inches of ventilation, or 2/3 of the Evanston's. The Skydome tent has 3 massive mesh wall vents, giving me about 1600 square inches of ventilation, which is actually slightly better than my screen room tent. The regular Sundome tent also has 3 vents, but only 2 of them are massive mesh wall vents. The last vent is a ground vent that's a lot smaller, so altogether about 1600 square inches of ventilation for the 6-person tent and 850 square inches for the 2-person tent. The Elite Sundome and the Sundome Darkroom 6-person tents have only 2 mesh wall vents each, but the Elite Sundome has slightly bigger mesh wall vents because the length of the tent is 2 feet longer. And while the Red Canyon tent has 3 vents, they're all pretty tiny, giving me just about 400 square inches of ventilation. As for my Montana, Instant Cabin, and pop-up tents, they have minimal ventilation because no windows can be opened and there are also no vents at all. Here's a table showing you the amount of ventilation that I just mentioned for each Coleman tent. But please take all these numbers with a huge pinch of salt. Because ultimately, especially for the tents with the vents, the amount of ventilation you get depends largely on how you stake the vents out. Here's how I rated each Coleman tent for ventilation. I also rain tested each of these tents and found that Coleman tents are pretty good in light rain, but not so much under heavy rain. Here's how long each Coleman tent stayed dry while under heavy rain. I found that the length of each tent's rainfly really affects how long it stays dry under heavy rain. The best Coleman tents I have against heavy rain are the Sundome tent series, as well as the Evanston and Carlsbad tents. Notice that the rainflies cover about 1/3 of the entire tent body. For each of these tents, the leaking started at the sides of the tents, with shorter rainflies after 30 minutes and not the sides with longer rainflies. Next up, we have the Coleman Skydome tent. While it has a really long rainfly length at 3 sides of the tent, the front has a really short rainfly length, and this wall was the first to leak after 15 minutes. The Montana 8-person tent looks like it has a decently long rainfly, but notice that this part isn't covered by the rainfly at all, and it's where it first leaked. Same goes for the Weathermaster 10-person tent and the Red Canyon 8-person tent. While the rainflies for both these tents are extended at the sides of the tent, the front of both tents have really short rainflies. And in last place, we have the Coleman Instant and pop-up tents, each with really tiny rainflies, so a lot of water ran over the tent body. One more disadvantage of the pop-up tents is that they don't have bathtub flooring, while the rest of my Coleman tents have these tub floors. Apart from these tub floors, Coleman's WeatherTech system also features these inverted seams. But in my experience, these inverted seams don't keep out rain as well as taped seams. And for all my Coleman tents, the inverted seams at the top of the bathtub flooring is always the first place to leak. Based on rain protection, here's how I rated each Coleman tent. For quality, I looked at the different materials used in each tent as well as the defect rate of Coleman tents. The flooring of all my Coleman tents are made of polyethylene, which is this tarp-like material. The one exception is my Coleman pop-up tent, which I think has a polyester flooring. The tent body and rainflies of all my Coleman tents are made of polyester, usually 68 to 75D. The one exception are the Coleman Instant tents, I think, which are supposedly made of 150D polyester taffeta. Most Coleman tents come with fiberglass poles, and the 3 exceptions are the Weathermaster 10-person tent, the 10-person instant tent, and the 4-person instant tent, which have these steel poles which are much sturdier and thicker. The mesh of all my Coleman tents is just regular mesh, not no-seam mesh, and the zippers are not branded. The double stitching is usually decent, and I've never found any huge holes, although sometimes I get this kind of patchwork along with a few loose threads. The carry bags of most Coleman tents are made of fairly thin polyester, though my Elite Sundome and Red Canyon tents come with thicker, higher quality carry bags. The materials found in Coleman tents are not top of the line kind of materials, but ultimately I think you get great value out of what you pay for them. Based on all the material info, here's how I rated each Coleman tent. So I ordered all of these 14 Coleman tents off of Amazon, and here's how many came with defects. I feel that Coleman's quality control could be a bit better, so I highly recommend that you check your tent within the 30-day Amazon return period. My 10-person instant tent had a major defect because the pole was attached the wrong way. The rest of the defects were pretty minor. The Elite Sundome tent came with a defective power pack, my Carlsbad came with not so darkroom tech, and the Skydome came with pole pockets that were sewn the wrong way around, so I had to take the stitches out on my own. For portability, I looked at the weight of each Coleman tent from the heaviest to the lightest. Also, here are the packed sizes of each Coleman tent as well. For the packed size, yours may be different from mine, and it ultimately depends on whether you rip the strip off the bottom of the bag and also how neatly you fold it. But here are a few things to take note of. The instant tents aren't necessarily a lot heavier, but they are about 60% longer than the non-instant tents of the same capacity. The same goes for the pop-up tents. The Coleman ones come in this pretty bulky circular shape. And if you have a Coleman tent with a screen room, the packed size would be the same as a tent with a capacity of 2 more people. For portability, here's how I rated each Coleman tent. And finally, here are the overall results. I tried to be as fair as possible in each category, especially for comfort, ventilation, rain, and quality. But obviously for the rest, the big tents are going to score not so great for setup and takedown, but great in spaciousness and vice versa, so I tried to use this weightage at the top to balance out the final score, which is this. Before we get into the recommendations, here's a quick word from our sponsor. I'm just kidding, I don't have one, so I had to spend slightly more than $2,000 and over 6 months trying to put this together, so please help me hit that like button if you found this video helpful. And now for my recommendations, I'll compare the bigger 8 to 10-person family tents together, and then compare the smaller 2 to 6-person tents. Of the 8-person and 10-person Coleman tents that I have, the Weathermaster 10-person tent and the 10-person instant tent came in first, but if I had to pick just one, I prefer the Weathermaster. It has a base area that's about 8 square feet bigger, and the peak height is a whopping 7 inches higher. On top of that, the angled windows make rainy day ventilation in the Weathermaster the best amongst my big Coleman tents. But of course, the 10-person instant tent has plenty of pros as well, my favorite being the darkroom tech, which keeps the instant tent not only a lot darker inside the tent during the day, but also a lot cooler in temperature. Hot day ventilation is also fantastic with humongous windows on every wall. Also, compared to the Weathermaster, this 10-person instant tent sets up about 3 minutes faster, has a nice cabin shape, which allowed me to fit 4 queen beds instead of just 3 queen beds like the Weathermaster. So in summary, the Weathermaster is a little more spacious and much better on rainy days, while the 10-person instant tent is a much better choice for hot, sunny days. For the best budget large family tent, I'm gonna pick either the Red Canyon or the Montana 8-person tent. These tents are quite a bit less expensive than my Weathermaster and 10-person instant tent, but I understand why. They do fall short in a number of ways. First, the Red Canyon and Montana are made of these thinner fiberglass poles, while the 10-person tents are made of thicker and more durable steel poles. Second, because the thinner fiberglass poles of the Red Canyon and Montana are long and less sturdy, they were a lot more difficult to prop up on my own, and it took me between 1 to 3 minutes longer to set these up compared to my Weathermaster tent. Third, after the setup, the decrease in livable space was actually quite noticeable. The Red Canyon and Montana have a slightly lower peak height, and I couldn't walk around these tents as much as the Weathermaster and 10-person instant tent. Fourth, both the Red Canyon and Montana have only 1 door, while the Weathermaster and 10-person instant tents have 2 doors each. And fifth, the hot day ventilation of both the Red Canyon and Montana is nowhere as great as the 10-person instant tent, and rainy day ventilation is nowhere as good as the Weathermaster 10-person tent. But the upside is that they are a lot cheaper, and I paid about half the price for my Red Canyon and Montana compared to my 10-person tent. Now, between the Red Canyon and Montana, my choice is easily the Red Canyon. It has a base area that's about 37 square feet bigger than my Montana, and this base area is almost as big as my Weathermaster. The Red Canyon also has better hot day ventilation and rainy day ventilation than the Montana. It also comes with 2 dividers, a gear loft, and a clothesline, which the Montana doesn't have. But the Montana has a hinged D-door and E-port, which the Red Canyon doesn't have. However, the Red Canyon has these thin rainfly fiberglass poles, and one of them snapped on my first use, so I highly recommend bringing along these tent repair pole splints. Now, with the big family tents out of the way, let's talk about the screen room tents. I have only the Evanston 6-person and the Carlsbad 4-person tent. There's not a lot of difference between the two, both have about the same overall score, but ultimately I prefer the Evanston for a few reasons. First, the rainfly of the Evanston tent covers a bit more of the screen room, while the Carlsbad tent doesn't cover the screen room at all. Second, when you take the rainfly off the Evanston, you get unblocked views from the screen room. On the other hand, the Carlsbad has this piece of fabric over the screen room that cannot be removed. Third, the Evanston is actually less expensive than the Carlsbad, so that's more bang for your buck. But of course, the Carlsbad is pretty good as well. Unlike the Evanston, it has darkroom tech, a bigger door, and an E-port. And now let's move on to the smaller 2 to 6-person Coleman tents. The Sundome Darkroom and Elite Sundome 6-person tent scored the best of all my Coleman tents, but I prefer the Darkroom tent, and that's my best value for money pick. I paid barely over $100 for the Sundome Darkroom tent, and it was so worth it. There were so many pros to this tent. The setup was easy, the pack up was equally easy, there's a decent amount of space, it was super cool inside the tent during the day, ventilation is decent, and rain protection is also pretty good. And last but definitely not least, the Darkroom feature is absolutely amazing. Here's a couple more experiments that I did. Here's a clip of me switching on a 250 lumen lantern inside the darkroom tent. The only light seeping out is from the window, door, and vents. Compare this to a regular Sundome. It's pretty amazing. Also, if you're the type that doesn't like a single spot of light when you're sleeping at night, this tent is almost pitch black. The reason I picked the Sundome Darkroom over the Elite Sundome is because I paid a lot more for the Elite. Sure, I got a bigger base area, 2 doors, one of which is hinged, auto-rolling windows, a room divider, pre-attached lighting, and a higher quality carry bag, but for me at least, it's hard to justify the humongous price increase. Ultimately, I think you should check out the prices of the Elite Sundome tent against the regular and blackout Sundome. If it's not too much more expensive and you like the extra features, I think the Elite Sundome could be worth it. If you need something even less expensive though, I'd go with the 2-person Sundome tent. It takes me just 5 minutes to set up and take down. It has enough base area to fit an entire queen bed. It's easily the most compact and lightest Coleman tent that I have, and to top it all off, it's super inexpensive. I paid less than $50 for mine. Personally, I would upgrade to the 6-person Sundome if there's not too much of a price difference, because it has an awesome 6-foot peak height and I'm able to stand upright and walk around the Sundome tent. If you love a quick and easy setup, Coleman has 3 types of tents that supposedly set up faster than your conventional Coleman tent. The pop-up tent is by far the easiest Coleman tent to set up. Just take it out of the carry bag, remove the black strap holding the tent together, toss it away from you, and watch it pop open with the rainfly pre-attached. This takes all of 15 seconds. The Coleman instant tents don't have quite the same pop-up mechanism. Instead, you gotta pull on the elbow joints to prop the poles up, and then extend all the telescoping wall poles upward, and then secure the rainfly over the tent. But because the poles of these instant tents are pre-attached, that saves you the trouble of having to insert them through pole sleeves. This decreased my setup timing by about 30 to 50%. Coleman also has a fast pitch system, which comes with pre-attached poles, fast-fitting feet, and pole clips instead of pole sleeves. But when I actually tested the Skydome 4-person tent, it took me a whopping 9.5 minutes to set up, which is about the same time it would have taken me to set up a Sundome 4-person tent. Honestly, I found the pre-attached poles kind of silly. It's only pre-attached to the back of the tent, so you still have to put the entire pole together and then secure the other end, which is the more difficult part. Also, for the Coleman dome tents at least, the pole sleeves are rather short and snag-free, so it didn't take me very long to prop the poles up myself. So, if you're looking for a super easy setup, go for either the pop-up or instant tents, not the fast pitch system. However, do bear in mind these additional pros and cons. The Coleman pop-up tents pop up real quick, and they also pack up super quickly. But it does take some practice to get used to the pack up. My first time packing up the Coleman pop-up tent, it took me more than 5 tries to get it right, I think. The Coleman pop-up tents also have the lowest peak height, the smallest base area, and the least storage options. Hot day ventilation is less than your average Coleman tent, and there's no rainy day ventilation. Rain protection is also minimal, and the fiberglass poles are thin. The Coleman instant tents have some of the same flaws, like minimal rainy day ventilation and not so good rain protection. Also, you have to buy the rainfly separately. But unlike the Coleman pop-up tents, the instant tents have a decent peak height and base area, and I also like the much thicker steel poles and double thick tent fabric. As always, if there's not too much of a price difference between this 4-person instant tent and the 6-person version, I'd always highly recommend the 6-person instead, because you can stand up in it and there are windows on all 4 walls, so more ventilation on hot days. Please help me smash that like button if this was useful, and if you do decide to buy a tent I recommend, it would mean a lot if you could use my affiliate links in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see ya in the next one.